Alright, so last night from when I'm recording this, Prydwen dropped their very first Chaos Zero Nightmare tier list. And I know for gacha games just in general, a lot of players will look at tier lists and just be like, oh, this character is good because this tier list has them in, like top tier, high tier, right? But Chaos Zero Nightmare is a very interesting case because from my own experience so far, and also what I've heard from other people, pretty much every character can be viable. And, as long as you have a good build for them, you pair them up really well with their abilities compared with, other characters on the team. Because since it is a deck builder kind of game, there are a lot of possibilities to make a character shine, I feel like. So, I definitely am interested to see this. And what is cool is that, I'll actually just show the tier list first of all here. This is the tier list that we're looking at here. Very awesome that we only have 3 tiers, to be honest. Because that shows the power of the characters in the game. Even the characters that are on the bottom can still have value. It's just going to depend on where they're going to be useful. Plus, this tier list is specifically for the Dimensional Twilight endgame mode, which I haven't even gotten to yet. I'm about a bit more than halfway through the Dimensional Dawn, which is the permanent version of Dimensional Twilight. So that is something to keep in mind there as well from my experience. So today I want to talk about my thoughts on the tier list here, which I haven't gotten to try out every character, obviously, because I'm free to play, and the game's only been out for a bit over a week now. But just from my general experience and looking at these characters, plus also they did give a little write-up for all the tier zeros, which I think is very interesting. So I do want to talk about that here. But before we get into the characters, they do have it split up into 4 categories here, which I think is pretty reasonable for the launch here. So on the left, we have our main DPS style characters, which are just going to be focused damage dealers. Then we have support DPS characters, which are either going to be characters who are just a sub DPS, providing extra damage, if they provide extra damage, as well as some extra buffs or bonuses, for example how Veronica here has a draw or upgrade, and then how Beryl over here is also a draw character, can draw cards into the hand. That's going to be those characters here that have a combination of damage and support, which brings us to the next part here, supports. Pretty much characters that aren't really meant to do a lot of damage, but they have really good support capabilities, like Mika being able to give you AP. You have Cassius and Nia, and also Ray here, who can search the deck. Cassius and Nia also have drawing capabilities to draw extra cards. So the supports, they're really just going to be the characters that are helping you out to get the cards and setups that you want to get. And then finally we have shielders, which it kind of makes sense to have a shielder category and not just a full-on sustain category for this game, because characters in the support category will just have healing, right? So a lot of the time you don't really need to have a dedicated healer, and there isn't a dedicated healer character. A lot of the time they're going to be supporting as well, which I think is perfectly fine for the game. But the shielders are going to be characters that prioritize shields and just overall survivability in that kind of sense. They're usually very defense oriented, so that is their role here. So firstly, before I go, because a lot of the characters that I've played are actually in tier 1, so I want to talk about the tier 0 write-ups here, because the tier 0 characters, we have Hugo, we have Tressa, Veronica, Mika, and Khalife. Now the only one I have actual experience with beyond a tutorial is Mika. I have been building my Mika. She is very good, and I think she's going to be pretty universal, honestly. She can make AP with her source of, I believe it's her source of water card, and that is just really good in of itself. Plus also she has some pretty solid healing as well in her kit. So I think she's going to be someone who works very well, especially with all these AP hungry DPSs, which I use both Horror and Kairon on my account. So definitely am enjoying the fact that I'm using Mika now, because she does help them out a lot in getting the really big damage off. So now, I'm not going to read through these word by word because I read them before already and I don't want to bore y'all, but to get my overall thoughts here, so basically, this is why these characters are tier 0, which I think is very important here. And also to set the sort of standard that Prydwen uses, because I feel like everyone who makes a tier list is going to have a slightly different one. So it is good to see the kind of thought process that they've been going on based on how they're ranking characters. So Hugo, basically he's the follow-up attack character. He gets stacks, and when an ally does a single target hit on enemy, if he has a stack, he'll consume one to do a follow-up attack, which is super nice and just gives him a really nice way to deal damage as well. So, and also from his kit, he doesn't need like a very specific card to get these stacks. He does have the stacks on a lot of his cards there. So Hugo is able to perform very well very quickly, which is super nice. And I do have him, so I definitely want to build him at some point. I want to build everyone, honestly. I feel like that's something I'm just going to keep saying until I can actually get to the point where I can build everyone. Next up, we have Tressa as a support DPS here, because her gameplay is based off of, from the tutorial I played at least, from the main story. Tressa is based on creating her like daggers and doing a lot of actions with those, which works really well with Hugo because every time Tressa does a dagger, it's a single target hit, so you can just get follow-up after follow-up as long as Hugo has enough stacks. So because of their synergy together, that also works very well. Plus also, she also doesn't require like a very specific card like some characters do. Like for example, for Haru, her big damage card is gonna be her Anchor Shot. And she also has the Anchor Lock card, which can increases both the cost and also the damage, I'm pretty sure, of that card. So looking for very specific cards to have like that window of damage is something you'll see in a lot of characters, but for Hugo and Tressa, you don't really have that in there, so that is pretty good as well. Next up, Veronica is also tier 0 for support DPS because she is very good at drawing cards from the deck. Plus she also does have some passive damage as well with her ballista cards, so she is going to be a very strong character to support characters that either want a lot of cards or just teams that want a bit more damage, because she's going to be able to do some decent damage on her own. And then I'll kind of skip over Mika because we did talk about Mika there. I feel like Mika's performance is just going to be based on, like, in terms of like in the future, that's going to be based on if they release either other AP hungry characters, or if they release future supports that can also generate AP at a similar level, if not even better, which I think is possible because she is only a 4-star. So we'll have to see how she'll last, but for right now in like week 1, she's a very good character, and honestly one I recommend everyone to build because she's a tutorial character, so you can get her for free. Plus she's on the featured banner right now with Haru, so definitely a good time to pick up some Mikas. Then for shielders we have Kalipe. Kalipe is strong enough to be able to have really good shields, plus also be a DPS. They have her as the hybrid DPS role here. So Kalipe can be a hybrid DPS, which is super nice to just get some more damage, but you can still run her as a shielder too, to just get some extra survivability there and just focus on your survivability. Plus she is also an AoE character too, so she'll perform very well in those AoE setups, and that helps out I think even a lot of the like higher tier characters too, because Hugo's single target, Tressa's single target, right? So if you have Kalipe, you do get a bit of AoE damage, which it is nice to have a mix of the two, unless you know you're going into a fight with a singular like boss or elite enemy. So those are all the tier 0s there. Definitely a pretty solid choice overall, and based on what I know, it makes sense. And I think as I learn more about the game and as we get future characters where this tier list will change, then I'll probably have more thoughts besides that for the tier 0s. But to go into the characters that I've used as well, which is mainly in the tier 1, which honestly, the only tier 2 character I've used is Amir, who is like, she's alright. I didn't get too much use with her because I pulled Magna a bit after, but as a free character, not bad. But to go into these tier 1s here, because this is the main place where I'm going to have characters that I've used, let's start with DPSs. Haru, and I guess I'll do Haru and Kairon kind of together because they're the two DPSs I've been using. They are both very good, but they do, as a lot of characters do, they do require setup into their strongest moves. For Haru, like I mentioned, you want to buff up her Anchor Shot as much as possible to get the most like single target damage, because she could be a very good boss killer in that sense. And she does have an Epiphany as well, where she's able to just have Anchor Shot consume all the cards in her hand, and it'll buff the damage of Anchor Shot based on the amount of cards consumed. So you're able to actually get a very strong damage multiplier from that, and do some really strong damage to bosses if you position it correctly, and if you even buff it before that as well. Then Kairon, on the other hand, his damage and overall efficiency just bases on his ability to exhaust the futility cards that he creates. Whether it be an ability itself, like his ego skill buffing his damage output by consuming the futility right there, or some of his epiphanies allowing him to increase the damage or decrease the cost of some of his cards based on the amount of futility cards that have been exhausted in the battle. So both of them do some pretty strong damage. I do think for the most part, Haru does have a little bit of AoE, but she is mainly going to be a single target character. Meanwhile, Kayron excels in AoE while also having some strong single target damage. So they are both pretty solid for tier 1 there. Next up, we have Beryl, who is a character that I just started using literally yesterday, but I've heard a ton of good things about her, and she's an amazing character to not only draw cards from the deck, because she does have a card that draws 3 cards for you, but she also does some pretty solid damage, because the way you want to play her, let me actually pull this up tier 2. The way you want to play her, and yeah, I'm gonna keep my ad blocker on Prydwen, is you want to focus around her opening found card and her charge shot cards, which both have the retain effect. Now this effect is going to make it so that if you keep the card in your hand based on the effect here, it's not going to discard it at the end of the turn since it has retain. And if you do retain it for an extra turn for opening found, it's going to deal an extra hit on that next turn. And then if you do that for charge shot, if you retain it, it's going to increase the damage multiplier by 80%, which is super nice, honestly. So you're going to want to keep these cards in her hand as much as possible. This is the card I was mentioning as well, where you can draw. And she does also have some really cool epiphanies with the Guilty Pleasure card here too. So that is important to keep in mind, but she's a really good character to not only deal a very consistent amount of damage if you're playing around those retain cards correctly, but she can also do very well in bringing more cards into your hand so that you can have a better time getting the cards you need if you're setting up a DPS, like how I've been using her for Haru, for example, to try to buff up Anchor Shot as much as possible, because with Beryl, I can get more cards in the deck so that my Epiphany to discard my entire hand to buff Anchor Shot, that'll allow me to have more cards and deal more damage. So that is very good there as well. And then I haven't used Selena yet, so I won't talk about her too much in depth. So then next up for supports, which Ray I've only used in the story so far, but for Cassius, and I haven't used Nia at all here, but for Cassius is a character I've been using. And his playstyle is very fun, and he's also very good. Because Cassius's whole deal is, and especially when you have dupes in him as well, you're going to be able to draw cards from the deck. He has a card which will allow you to pick a card from your either draw or discard pile to just bring back into your hand, and is overall just a character that benefits really a lot of teams he's on, because not only does he allow you to draw extra cards, but he even has the ability to let you pick a specific card. So for example, if you get, I'm going to use Haru as an example, because I'm sure a lot of people have been using her since she's the rate-up character right now. Let's say for example I'm running Haru and Cassius together, and Haru gets Lock Anchor, which is the buff card for her Anchor Shot, but I don't have an Anchor Shot in my hand. I could just use Cassius if I have his Joker card, and I can just pull the Anchor Shot card out of my hand, or not out of my hand. I can pull it back into my hand, which is super nice to be able to get the actual card. Now, of course, for that situation, I'd had to have enough AP, which is where it's so nice to have a 3-person team. Because I haven't tried it yet, but I could probably run Haru, Cassius, and Mika. Because then if I pair that with Mika, I could probably get the AP that I need to have the Anchor Shot there, and I could have it actually be usable. So there are a lot of different combinations for sure that this game has, and Cassius and even Nia to an extent, which I haven't used her really, so I can't comment on how her drawing and searching actually works. But the fact that she has those tags as well makes her really valuable and makes Cassius very valuable, because if you're missing just that one card to have a really good turn, they may have their drawing or searching card in the hand there, and if you have that in the hand, that can change or completely change what you are doing in that turn there. Instead of having maybe a kind of mid-turn, you might have a really good turn because you're able to get that one card that allows you to pull off a certain combo. So that is very good there as well. Then finally, for the shielders here, now I haven't actually pulled Maribel yet. She's the only 4-star I don't have, but I have pulled Magna, and Magna has been very fun to use. He ends up being just a shielder, counterattack kind of character, and she's given me some pretty solid survivability. Now, the teams I've used her on don't have the most when it comes to healing, but that's alright in all honesty. I feel like once I get some more characters built, I'll have her with a healer. Like maybe I'll run her on a team with like her, Mika, and then a DPS. I think that could also be good, but her shields are pretty solid, and she does deal some pretty cool damage with her counterattacks as well. So probably not to the same level as like Felipe, which I don't have experience using her yet because I don't have her, but with Magna, she does do some solid damage on the counterattacks as well. I wouldn't say it's like main DPS level based on the types of cards she has, kind of like how Felipe is, but kind of like a support DPS level damage, I want to say, at points, but being a shielder, which is pretty nice overall. And it definitely makes her a cool character to use here, but that is pretty much all I can comment on with my current experience in the game. I definitely do want to play more of the characters and, you know, get to know how more of them work as well, so I can make, you know, my own sort of opinions for this. But definitely cool that we have a sort of community tier list here from Prydwen, which if y'all like this kind of content, I'll definitely try to give my thoughts whenever they update it here, which they do have 2 characters on their watch list right now, but I won't go over that today. Something that they discovered with a new like item drop for like the equipment when you're doing the chaos runs, but we'll see if that ends up being anything. But I'd love to see your thoughts in the comments down below about this tier list and about Chaos Zero Nightmare so far as well. I definitely do want to work on a kind of like 2-week review video coming up this week, so we'll see when I'm going to get that out. But for now, that's going to be the end for me. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed and want to see more content from me, be sure to hit that subscribe button. But with that, everyone, I will see you all next time.